Let's do some drywall. Hello everybody, today we're doing a crack repair in a ceiling. I have a helper. I'm overwhelmed here with a lot of jobs going on, so I had some help with a good buddy of mine. But we're just doing a stress crack repair in a garage. This is a common repair in all houses. Cracks in garages and ceilings on any part of the drywall. It's the same process. When drywall usually cracks out, it's on the joint seams or the butt seams. The long cracks are usually the joint seams. Why this happens is it could be a number of things. It could be a bad sheetrock layout, not enough screws or nails put in to tighten up the sheetrock. The paper tape they use in the original builds is good for building because they're doing mass production. They're doing 100 sheet, 200 sheet jobs, so they have to put the tape on with a bazooka, a taping machine that puts on the paper tape, and the mud underneath, sometimes the mud just fails and gives out. It's just paper and gypsum mud that's holding this up. So all it takes is a little bit of a vibration, some settling, stress cracks, stuff like that, and the tape is going to give way and separate. Sometimes you might not have cracks on the joint seams or the butt seams. You might have a diagonal crack in the sheetrock. That's different. That would be like a stress point or someone stepped in the ceiling or something else. Usually a stress related issue. But on these joints like this, you always want to dig out the old tape. Dig out that old paper tape. You're not just going to put tape over the old crack and then mud over it. You want to always try to dig out this old paper tape whenever possible. It is tedious. You're going to have to dig it out with a 6-inch knife. It takes time. It's messy. So if you're going to do this, put down some plastic or some tarps to catch all your demo debris. And you're just going to have to work at this tape. It's time consuming. Takes a lot of energy. After a while, you just want to say, no, I'm done with this. But you want to try to dig it out. A lot of guys, they don't do this and they've tape over the crack and then it's just going to re-crack out. So if you want to try to do it the proper way, let's dig out that old paper tape. Dig it out, dig it out. It's going to take time. Drywall job, majority of the job is just digging out this old tape. We're just going to plug away here. We're doing a 20-foot long crack on a garage. It's in the middle of the garage, so I could just say it's like a stress point. Plus with the garage door go up and down, it causes the trusses to vibrate and shake. So you're going to get stress points. This is a newer home, a 7-year-old house. So of course, after about 5 to 10 years, you're going to start getting settling issues on any new houses. It's a very common issue. It doesn't mean your house is falling apart. It's just a maintenance thing. You're going to have to fix these cracks as you see them. Don't wait until you get 100 linear foot or so to start repairing them. Once you start seeing cracks, just fix them so they don't keep going all the way across like this one. Literally went all the way across the garage over 20 linear foot in length. My buddy here, he's digging out using a 6-inch knife. Once he gets that tape opened up, then he's going to go through and put screws in it. You want to add screws on each side of the sheetrock. Add a screw, add a screw. That way you're tightening up the sheetrock. Also, if you're unable to get that tape out, you can always do a V-notch technique. A V-notch technique works if you're unable to get that tape out. And usually you do that on diagonal cracks and cracks that aren't on a joint seam or a butt seam. But more likely you'll be able to get this tape seam out if it's been painted on with a semi-gloss paint. It's been repaired over and over the years, then it doesn't come out as easy. But original tape should come right out. Once you get it all dug out and plenty of screws in, now you opened up a little notch where your new tape is going to sit in. So now you're not trying to have to blow out heavy floating the crack area. You can just literally put the mud over the notch that you dug out the old tape. So you're not crowning out the joints. That's what it means, crown out joints, when you build up a lot of mud on it and you're basically putting a big old hump on the ceiling. I'm sure you notice in ceilings and walls, some places you'll notice a hump on the wall. Well, that's called a crown joint. So you just want to dig it out, get that old stuff dig out, and add plenty of screws. That way, if it is a loose sheetrock issue, by putting the screws in place It'll tighten up the sheetrock. Plenty of screws, plenty of screws. Also, we don't use paper tape on repairs. I'm going to always follow through with a fiberglass mesh tape. A lot of people out there, the discussion is don't use fiberglass tapes. Use this kind of infusion tape, this tape, that tape. Hey, whatever you want to use. I use the fiberglass mesh tapes. I have to warranty my jobs for a minimum of 2 years. So we use the fiberglass tapes because they never failed yet. So I'm not going to switch to some new products on the market and practice on people's homes. I'm going to use the true and tested method that I know that works and hasn't failed me yet. If there's a stubborn crack that keeps cracking out, maybe you can do 2 layers of fiberglass tape. Maybe you repaired the area more than twice. Now you want to probably start using these specialty infusion tapes and stuff like that. But just with simple repairs, just use a fiberglass mesh tape. Watch my buddy go through here. He's just going to add plenty of screws. He knows that you need to put plenty of screws in to tighten up this stuff. That way it doesn't re-crack out. I'm using a spray glue. You notice this can of spray glue. This is an optional product. You'll see in a lot of my videos I use a spray glue. You don't have to use it. It's not going to change the quality of the job or anything if you don't use it. Why we use it? The spray glue helps tack the fiberglass in place, especially on the ceilings. The fiberglass tape naturally has stickiness to it, so it'll stick to sheetrock. It doesn't like to stick to ceilings and old sheetrock, dusty sheetrock. It really likes to bond well and hold in place to new sheetrock face paper. So I like to put this on patches and ceilings so the tape stays in place. I use it all the time because I go to get everything taped up, and if I didn't use spray glue, I go mix up my mud, and then the tape starts falling down, and then I'm gonna have to put my mud pan down and my tools and go back and push the tape back in place, and turn around, pick up my mud, and then tape it, and then mud over it. So it's easier just for me to do a little bit of spray glue, tack this fiberglass in place. Since we notched out the old tape, the new fiberglass is going to sit perfectly in the notch. You don't need to overlap the sheetrock. It should fit nice and perfect in the area. So just get it all screwed up. After it's all dug out, plenty of screws, optional product spray glue. Then use the fiberglass. Get all your joints fiberglassed. Don't miss anything. All of it has to be fiberglassed. If you just mud over this without fiberglass, then it's going to crack out, of course. If you're concerned about re-cracks, some guys like to do 2 layers of fiberglass. If you want to go out and try to find some specialty tapes, go ahead. But I'm just telling you, the regular fiberglass works wonders. And when in doubt, just do 2 layers of it to really get it on there. Just follow along, just watch him work. I'm helping him down below. Don't need 2 guys working on 1 crack, so I'm just handing him stuff. I got lucky today, I have a helper. I could have did it myself, but I like to watch other people work once in a while. So I'm just giving a helping hand when I can, but I'm going to be doing all the texturing because I like to do textures. Notice I'm not spraying a lot of spray glue, I'm just doing a little bit. I'm not trying to drip wet spray glue. It's just enough just to tack the tape up, and the tape will stick and hold in place. Also, like this is going a joint and then it's going to cross on a butt joint. Butt joint's going the opposite direction. So I like to overlap the 2 areas. So now the intersection of the butt joint and the joint is extra strong. 2 layers of tape. Just makes it nice and strong. Sometimes you can follow it with your 6-inch knife on the tape to push it down to make sure it's really stuck in the gap. Just follow along. Pretty simple process. Digging out the old tape, get it all old dug out. If need be, V-notch it. Then turn around, add screws, fiberglass tape it, and then you're ready for first coat. We're working in the garage, so excuse the poor lighting. We're just up and down with the garage door, just working around the garage door. It's just basically a long joint seam in the middle of a garage. But just follow along. And then once we start mudding, I'll follow through on the next process. Follow through, make sure everything's all taped up. Now you're ready for mudding. Double check, make sure you didn't miss anything. Nothing's worse than going back and having to tape something that you forgot after you start mudding. So you have to put down your mud pan, your knives, run out, grab more tape, and finish up what you missed. So always check your work before you mix up mud. So you can see he's just putting a little piece over the butt joint, and then he's going to overlap it, the joint over the butt. Gives an extra secured tape line on the intersection of the butt and the joint. All the stuff you scraped out, that's why we put down plastic and tarps. It makes a big mess. If you don't have the paint match, keep a piece of your cutout, like a 2" by 2" piece. That makes a perfect piece you can take to any paint store and get a paint match. With this, we're going to be using a hot mud. I don't recommend anyone using hot muds unless they know what they're doing. If you're not comfortable with mudding, just use a joint compound. With the joint compounds, they have to dry overnight, and then you turn around and sand it. With these hot muds, there's a 5-minute, 20-minute, 40-minute, and a 90-minute. We're just using a 5-minute because it sets up perfect for us to slick out. I know it's a bigger job. Most people say, why don't you use a 20-minute? Well, we're just using a 5-minute pan at a pan, and you would be surprised. You can get a whole pan of 5-minute on, no problem if you know what you're doing. Like I said, if you don't know how to use hot muds, just stick to joint compounds. They're easier to work with, and if you do make a mistake, at least you can sand away your mistakes. With hot muds, once they set up like a cement. So you got to know what you're doing with these hot muds. We're just mixing up a pan of 5-minute here using fresh water. Just mixing in a pan at a time using a 6" knife. There's no right or wrong way to mix it, but we just mix it this way. It keeps it in the pan, not makes a big mess. Of course, you want to mix over plastic because you might drip some water and stuff like that. Follow through with your coating knife. Some guys like to strike in the tape all the way since they just left a channel where the tape is. You can strike it in, but we're going to strike it in pretty heavy and then follow it through with a real tight skim coat. Get it coated quickly. I know the lighting isn't the best here. It is in a garage. So we're just working on the ceiling with the garage door halfway closed. Just fill in that seam. Nice little channel you created for yourself because you spent the extra time digging out that old tape. It goes in nice and perfect. Takes the guesswork of how much mud you need to put on because you just need to fill in the area. We're leaving the mud a little heavier because we are going to slick it out with a wet sponge and a 6" knife and take off the extra material so it leaves a nice healthy coat. He struck in the tape with a 6" knife. Now he's following it with a coating knife. Some guys like to use a 10" knife, 12" knife. Some even prefer 14. As for myself, my go-to knives are always a 6" knife and a 12" knife. So those are the two knives I always use. My buddy here looks like he's using a 14, which is fine because he likes to float out stuff, deep stuff. Get everything coated. If you're using a joint compound, you just have to coat this whole seam and just let it dry overnight and then follow through with the second coat. With a hot mud, you're going to have to work quickly. You want to get the materials on it and you want to clean up the extra materials out of your pan, off your knives. Get them all cleaned up before the mud starts to set up. Just follow through, just working here, getting it coated, taking our time so you kind of see the process. There's plenty of videos also on my channel doing stress crack repairs. So after this video, you can watch a few more videos and then you might become a drywall professional by watching these videos. No, not actually. It is an art. There is some technique to it. Sometimes we make it look easy. Maybe you have some cracks in your house you're trying to repair. Maybe you can at least try to dig out the old tape and do what you can, what you're comfortable doing. You should be comfortable enough to dig out the old tape, comfortable enough to add some screws. Get it as far as you can before you hire someone. If someone dug these out and had them all ready for me, they would have saved a few bucks. But we're just doing it, digging out the tape ourselves and from start to finish to get it textured. Get everything coated out. Let your coat set up with the hot mud set up with, like this is a 5-minute, so it's going to set up anywhere from the 4 to 6 minute range. If it was coated over a semi-gloss area, sometimes it takes a little longer. And always use fresh water. If you use dirty water, sometimes it's going to make your material set up a lot faster. With these hot muds, they're starting to set up, so your next step is to slick it out. I have tons of videos showing slick out hot mud process. You're catching this material as it's setting up. It's kind of like if you ever worked with cements. As cement starts setting up, you work it and you manipulate it. Clays, ceramics, same process. The material's starting to set up, so we're able to manipulate it. With the wet sponge, we're getting rid of that edge. That's the most important part, the edge where the mud work meets the old texture. You want to feather out that edge. You're basically using your 6-inch knife and pulling the mud out. You're just basically manipulating the mud, taking off the extra mud. And then if you have some mud still on your knife, you can use that to fill in any deep spots, scratches, stuff like that. If you do a good slick out technique, it's almost like a second coat over it. So that's why you want to just take your time and slick it out really nice. I've seen jobs that they slicked out really well and they got away with just doing one coat. But I like to at least do 2 coats, if not a tight skim over my first coat if it needs to fill in. We don't need a lot of mud on here since we filled in that channel, so most of it's just extra mud just to kind of feather out the edge. And then we're just going to follow through and mix another pan of hot mud and just do a tight strike in, basically where the tape line is. Strike it in. Any deeper areas we kind of float out. But just get everything sponged out. You want to do this before the mud fully sets up. I know on the bags of hot mud it says easy sandable, but you do not want to sand hot muds if possible. You want to work these hot muds before they fully set up and cure. If they fully set up and cure, you're not going to be able to manipulate it with the sponge like this. You're going to literally have to use all your energy and sand it down with like 80 grit or 100 grit, and it's not going to be a fun job to do. So just catch these hot muds before they fully set up. The work time on it, like I said, the 5 minutes, 4 to 6 minutes, you want to start slicking it out. 20 minute, I'd keep an eye on it from 15 to 25 minutes. 40 minutes the same. Keep an eye on it. 35 minutes to 45 minutes. Yada, yada, yada. You just want to keep an eye on it. Just don't walk away from your job and just say, well, I put a coat on it, I'm good for the day. No, you need to slick out these hot muds. That's why it's a more professional grade material. If you're not comfortable mudding, just use a joint compound. The joint compound, you just put it on. It's going to kind of shrink back as it dries overnight. And then anything you put on too heavy, you just sand away. Basically sand in between each coat with the regular joint compounds. That's a dustier, more labor-intensive method. We only use joint compounds for bigger jobs. I only use joint compounds for the texturing, or if I'm doing a large project where I just have to first coat, and that's all I can do for the day, then come back the next day and do a second coat. But just follow through, get everything slicked out nicely, and you could tell by the way it looks if it's smooth and perfect, then you need to ready for texture. If not, you're going to have to do a second coat. Usually get away with doing a tight second coat, skim coat over your first coat. But follow along, just watch him work, taking his time. Your sponge is going to get dry, so you want to keep a bucket of water next to you so you can just dip in, keep your tools clean, because this hot mud as you're slicking gets stuck on your knife, gets hard, so you want to keep your knife clean, keep the sponge wet, and just keep working the material. Keep working it, and then you'll get a nice job working with hot muds. I have several other videos on my channel working with hot muds, slicking out videos, other videos patching, stuff like that. You'll kind of watch a few videos and you'll see my technique. Everybody else has their own techniques, but I use this technique and it never failed me yet. So just follow along. This is how we would do it working with hot muds. Here looks good, so I'm just striking in the center with another coat of mud. I'm using, of course, another pan of 5 minutes. It's not going to take much, just striking in basically the tape line. If you go past your mopped in feathered edge, you're going to have to mop in, feather your edge. So we want to just stay inside the tape line, just filling in the tape line. Necessarily don't have to do this, but we're just striking it in to make sure it's nice and straight and level. Any deeper areas, of course, you're going to have to float out. But just follow through with the second coat. If this was a joint compound, you have to let this coat dry and then follow through. That's why we use these hot muds. That way I'm able to get these jobs done in one trip. I couldn't make a living if I had to keep driving across town to do every coat, come back the next day, come back the following day, come back the third day. So we have to use these hot muds to get everything done in one trip. So that's why I use the hot muds. But if you got nothing but time, just use a joint compound. It's easier to work with. That way, if you do make a mistake, you can just sand it away with a 100 grit, 150 grit, and it'll look great. Once it's all second coated and your second coat's set up, if you need to re-slick it out, go ahead. If you have a texture on here, we have a skip trowel texture. If you don't have a texture and it's smooth, you would just follow through with a tight skim coat with a joint compound. With here, we're doing a skip trowel. This skip trowel goes side to side, so I'm basically going to do a skip trowel. This is a different mud. You could use a joint compound, a thinned down joint compound, mixed really well. The consistency is like a heavy pancake batter. You don't want soupy, wet mud dripping all over the place. You want it to skip. I just made a video yesterday showing how to skip trowel. Skip trowel takes experience to do. Once you figure it out, it's easy, nice texture. It's done in most newer homes, anywhere from 10, 20, 30-year-old houses. Most of these newer homes out here, at least, track homes, use a skip trowel. Some of the newer homes also have a smooth texture. But majority of the houses, at least in my area, the newer homes have this skip trowel. So for me, it's easy to do since I've done so many of them. Notice I'm using a 6-inch knife. A lot of guys like to use bigger knives. That's fine. You could use a bigger knife. You want to make sure your bigger knife is straight. That's why I'm using a 6-inch knife, because it's straight and it gives me a perfect texture when I'm blending into existing. Sometimes the bigger knives are bowed and bent, so they kind of put on too much mud in the center or the edges. So that's why I use a 6-inch knife and just take my time. A little more effort, energy, more movements, of course, using a smaller knife. But on these repair works, it's just slow and surely we're texturing out. As you notice, I'm going past our mud seams. That way it transitions nicely. And then once I put the mud down, I'm going to follow through and lightly trowel down the mud. Just basically gliding the 6-inch knife over my mud texture to kind of knock it down so it's not big start marks, mud marks everywhere. Your edges, you can feather those edges off or just go past the texture. But just follow through and skip trowel everything. If you're not comfortable doing skip trowel, well, maybe at least you can get it to a smooth coat process and then just hire someone to come out and texture it, you know. Cheap, cheap, cheap. Just depends on your ability, what you think you can do. Skip trowel is more of an art. Most textures are an art. The older houses, they have spray textures like a spray knockdown, splatters, orange peels. These newer homes, skip trowel, which is easier for me. So that way I don't have to put up a big plastic curtain to contain the overspray, especially in a garage. If I had to do a spray texture in a garage, in a hot garage, it'd be miserable because I'd have to plastic off around the garage door, plastic off everywhere to contain the overspray, bring in the compressor, the hopper, muds, all that. So it just works good for me that this is a skip trowel today on this job. Just follow through skip trowel. I have several videos. I have a whole playlist of skip trowels and textures, so you'll watch plenty of those videos and kind of see my technique. Of course, everybody has their own technique, but my technique works, and I'm out here in the field doing it daily, so I have to work to eat. So this is why I'm doing my skip trowel with a 6-inch knife. That way I know it blends in nicely and it's a perfect match. Once you get everything textured out, you're just going to have to clean up the area that you worked at. Don't leave the plastic sitting overnight. It's just easier to pull your plastic, clean up everything. Just treat it as you're done with the project completely. Painting the next day, you just put down a fresh piece of plastic. Most textures like this, a skip trowel, you might have to lightly sand it with like 150 to 220 grit sandpaper, and then follow through with a primer. Always primer, drywall, muds. It just makes it easier for the paint, because if you didn't use a primer and you go to paint, your paint is going to soak into the center of the patch. And here it's the center of the tape seam is going to soak up gallons of paint, and it's always going to flash through. So just use a primer. Primers are cheap. You can get a gallon of Kills 2 latex primer sealer for like $10. Or you can use a PVA drywall sealer. Both work great. And you want to just use those no matter what. That's the most important thing before painting, is just use a primer on your drywall patches. Even a small nail hole that you fix in a wall should be primered before paint. It just makes the paint go on. It doesn't try to absorb into the center, especially where there's mud. Mud likes to absorb moisture. Paint, it's going to absorb a lot of paint. So that's why you use a sealer. But just let your textures dry with these joint compounds. They have to dry overnight. So at least overnight, 24 hours rule of thumb. You don't have to sand and primer them right away, but you want to eventually get them sanded and at least primered up, you know, within a week, month or so. Don't let them sit raw drywall for years and years, because they're just going to collect dust. So it's easier just while the area is still fresh to give it a light sanding and then just primer it up. And then you can paint it any other time. So as long as it's sealed up with the primer, you're good to go. But pretty simple, easy video here. Just fixing a stress crack, common repair. I have several other videos on the same thing, doing stress cracks, larger videos, smaller videos. I also have videos on doing the V-notch method. If you're unable to dig out that old paper tape, you can V-notch the cracks. So I have videos on that too, with using a razor blade to cut it out at a V-notch. But I hope you like this video. It's pretty simple. Had some help today, so this job went quickly and efficiently. Sometimes it's good to have a helping hand when you can get it. But I hope you like this video. I'm going to try to produce some more videos. It is the summertime out here. Where I worked is in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was a hot summer. Hot, hot, hot. 110, over 50 days straight this summer. It's just been a hot, miserable summer, so I haven't been producing many videos. But now it's starting to cool down, so hopefully I have enough energy to produce videos. Most of these jobs I can just barely get through my workday working in the heat, and the last thing I want to do is make a video on top of that. But I greatly appreciate it if you give me a like, a comment, and you watch my other videos. The channel's slowly growing. It's getting bigger and bigger. I've got more subs. I think we're over 5,000 subscribers now. I'm trying to reach 10,000. I wonder if I can get 10,000 subscribers. The only way I'm going to get more subscribers, if you guys like this video, give me a thumbs up and leave a comment. With that, it tells the YouTube algorithm to find my videos for drywall repairs. I greatly appreciate you guys for subscribing and watching my videos. It means a lot to me, and thank you.